Hi class, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about psychodynamic, humanistic, behavioral, and cognitive psychotherapies. So if we're going to talk psychodynamic, you know we're going to talk about Freud. So psychodynamic therapies emphasize the unconscious. Remember that idea from the personality chapter? We talked about the Freudian unconscious. We've got the conscious part of our brain, the preconscious, and the unconscious. And what lives in the unconscious? Well, it's the id. And what does the id want? It is motivated by sex and aggression. Another aspect of psychodynamic therapy is that the therapist is playing a very large role in interpreting what the person is saying, and also the role of early childhood experiences. So for Freud, he's sitting, I think I have a picture over here in one sec. Here is, this is where he would sit, and people would lie on the rug with their back to him, and he would really do quite a bit of interpretation of what you were saying. He would encourage you to free associate and just say whatever came to mind. He would encourage you to share your dreams with him, and then he would interpret this, and usually interpreting it in terms of your sexual and violent impulses. He would also make sense of what your early childhood experiences had been like. So if you were jealous of dad, that was now coming out in your dreams, or it would bubble up during stream of consciousness. Freudian psychoanalysis is the original psychodynamic therapy, but other therapies grew out of Freud's theories. So Freud, of course, proposed that humans are largely motivated by aggression and sex. And, of course, acting on those drives is not always compatible with social norms. You can't just have sex with your neighbor or your boss, or you can't beat up your dad. And what is it, do you remember, that tells us we can't do that? So you've got the id on kind of on one shoulder saying, I want to do these things. And then what do you have on the other shoulder? That's the superego that says, no. Not okay. That is absolutely socially unacceptable. And so there you are, the ego in the middle, and now you have a conflict. And you have anxiety because there's a conflict between the id and the superego. And once you've got the conflict, then those drives are repressed. Now, when they're repressed, they're just still in there and they're still lurking. And so the repressed behavior is going to affect your mood. And it's going to affect your behavior, and it's going to affect your dreams, okay? And so all this stuff bubbles up. And as you lie there on the couch, on the Turkish rugs, Freud will interpret that for you to help you identify what your repressed conflicts are. Psychoanalysis attempts to increase awareness of those conflicts and help you to work through them. So this is his psychoanalytic couch. It's on display at the Freud Museum in London. All of his patients reclined on this furniture. Apparently it was quite comfortable. It looks very nice. Soft cushions and an Iranian rug cover. And Freud would sit over here, close to but not within view of his patient. You can read more about this. I won't get into it in much detail, but the idea is that you're going to, he wants to not be visible to you because he wants you to transfer your sexual or aggressive impulses onto him. So if you are feeling angry at father who has humiliated you, and you would like to hit your father, but of course you can't, he wants you to transfer your feelings toward your father onto him, and he will become father figure. And you can aim those negative aggressive feelings toward him, which is safe, when you can't aim that at your father. And when you can kind of be cathartic with it, then you'll feel better. That's called transference. That's why he sits behind you. Now, there aren't a whole lot of people who practice Freudian psychotherapy anymore. However, there are some, and some people have some astonishing success with it. This is a very interesting book. If you were interested in borderline personality disorder from the disorders chapter, you might want to take a look at this one. What's interesting about this book is that she actually engages with a Freudian psychotherapist. So here's the what's it called? The summary. With astonishing honesty, this memoir, Get Me Out of Here, reveals what mental illness looks like and feels like from the inside. and how healing from borderline personality disorder is possible through intensive therapy and the support of loved ones. A mother, wife, and working professional, Ryland was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder at the age of 29, a diagnosis that finally explained her explosive anger, manipulative behaviors, and self-destructive episodes, including bouts of anorexia, substance abuse, and promiscuity. A truly riveting read with a hopeful message. Excerpt: My hidden secrets were not well concealed. The psychological profile had been right, as had the books on BPD. I was manipulative, desperately clinging and prone to tantrums, explosiveness, and frantic acts of desperation when I did not feel the intimacy connection was strong enough. The tough chick loner act of self-reliance was a complete facade. So she's in a mental hospital fairly early in the book, and a man comes in her room, a doctor, and it turns out he's a Freudian psychotherapist. And she has been, people have been trying to help her and treat her for some time, and she's really not getting anywhere. But this guy comes in and he says, I understand you and I can help you. And something about him clicks with her. And so the book describes a long, intense, several years of psychotherapy with him, which is really, really quite riveting. So take a look at that. Okay. Most people don't practice Freudian psychotherapy anymore. Freudian psychotherapy is lengthy. We're talking about years, going multiple times a week for years, for an hour at a time to share your dreams and engage in a stream of consciousness. Effective sometimes, but not data-driven, not research-based, and very time-consuming and expensive. So contemporary psychodynamic approaches are similar to Freud in that they are probing the unconscious and your childhood experiences in order to gain insight into current problems. However, there have been some updates. More power is ascribed to the conscious mind. So the idea here is that you may actually have some self-awareness of what's going on. We don't have to just plumb the depths of your unconscious. We can ask you what's happening. There's definitely less emphasis on the sex drive. There's shorter time in therapy. Who has 3 years, 3 times a week for this? Rachel Ryland did, but most people don't have that. There's also face-to-face dialogue as opposed to the therapist sitting behind you, and it's a more direct approach. Freud would interpret the dreams for you, but here there's really a direct asking you and telling you and giving you feedback and giving you advice, which Freud really did not do. And finally, and this is maybe the most important thing, is that the therapy has been tested with a scientific methodology. So if you look at any contemporary psychodynamic approach today, it has been tested and been found to be effective. This lovely man is Carl Rogers. These are his clients. Carl Rogers was an advocate for what's called humanistic therapy. So Rogers is really pushing against Freud. He doesn't like Freud's negativity. Freud really sees people as basically bad. He doesn't like the emphasis on sex and aggression. He doesn't like that Freud is the one who's kind of interpreting everything for you, and you're just sort of receiving this information from Freud's brain. Rogers thinks people are basically good and want to be better, and he believes that people are capable of identifying their own problems and addressing them. So this is 1950s, you can tell from the picture, and it was really focusing on the positive aspects of human nature. He believed people were good and inclined to growth, and the focus is really not on the childhood. That's really what Freud is looking at. Rogers doesn't care much about that. He's interested in what's happening to you now. What is happening in the present? How can we identify your current problems and help you figure out better ways to deal with those? So he developed a particular style of therapy called person-centered therapy. This was non-directive. Rogers does not tell the people who come to him for help what to do. In fact, he doesn't even call them his patients. He says they're his clients, and that he walks alongside them as they grow towards self-actualization. One of the key tenets of person-centered therapy is this idea of unconditional positive regard. Rogers says that he has to have unconditional positive regard for his clients, and that if he doesn't, that the therapeutic relationship is undermined. It doesn't mean that he approves of everything they do. If she beats her children, he doesn't have positive regard for the behavior, but he has positive regard for her. That's the idea of it being unconditional. Doesn't matter what you do, I see you as a person of value. Some of you were raised like this. Your parents viewed you as inherently valuable no matter what you did. But some of you were raised with parents who gave you conditional positive regard. You got praise and love and attention when you got good grades, when you behaved well, when you won the soccer game. But that tends to make people feel unworthy and as though they could lose the positive attention that they're getting at any moment if they're not successful anymore. So I would really encourage you, when you raise your own children, to have unconditional positive regard for them in the same way that Carl Rogers had for his people. So let's do a quick review here before we move on. I want you to think about Freud for a second. So the unconscious sex and aggression, childhood experiences, long time in therapy. The updates to him are that the conscious mind is given more power, less emphasis on sex, shorter time in therapy, more direct approach, and scientifically validated. With Rogers, I want you to think about unconditional positive regard, that humans are basically good and inclined toward growth, and focusing on current problems, not childhood, and that the person is really viewed as a client, not as a patient. So with that, let's talk about our third of 4 therapies, and that is behavior therapy. So the previous 2 are called insight therapies. They want you to develop some insight, some self-awareness of what is your problem, whether it's a source in childhood, like for Freud, or if it is maybe something currently happening with Rogers. And once we become self-aware, then we can fix whatever is the source of the problem. Behavior therapies find insight irrelevant. They do not care. Behavior therapies are action-oriented. We want to help somebody change their behavior, not their underlying thoughts or emotions. Now you may be thinking, wait a second, how can this be effective? Well, it is effective in some situations, okay? So behavior therapies sometimes use classical conditioning techniques, and these are used for treating phobias. So there's a particular technique called systematic desensitization. And this teaches the client to associate deep relaxation with increasingly intense anxiety-provoking situations like touching a white rat, or looking at a tarantula, or touching a cockroach, whatever it might be. So here's the basic approach. And I'll tell you, I did this with my daughter, Hannah. By about age 8, I shared with you before a little story about her being a little bit too anxious. Remember, we were baking and we had 2 cooling racks that were different. And I said, let's just sit here with these 2 cooling racks, because this is really not hurting anything. And we would both prefer they be the same one, but they're not, and it's okay. And we giggled about it, and she let that go. But around that same time, she began to be afraid of shots, flu shots in particular. And so she almost passed out one time when we had a flu shot. And for years after that, she was really, really resistant to getting her shot. And so I did systematic desensitization with her. So it starts at the base level. And here's what you do. You begin to imagine, or you actually go and do the thing. But first, it just starts with imagining. And you imagine approaching the thing that you're afraid of, while at the same time keeping yourself relaxed and calm. So the client learns to associate the anxiety-provoking situation with the desirable conditioned response, which is incompatible. Okay, so you keep yourself calm while thinking about the thing that you're afraid of. So with her, I said, while we're at home, let's just look at a picture of a hypodermic needle. And maybe initially that makes her a little bit anxious, but we do some deep breathing. And then we look at an actual hypodermic needle. And then we might touch a needle in its packaging. We might hold a needle. We might watch somebody get a shot. We might visit a health clinic to discuss getting a shot. Now, I didn't do these exactly because I don't have any access to hypodermic needles, but I had her, what I did with her, and I share this with you because maybe you would like to do this too. I said, let's imagine it's time to go get the shot. Let's imagine we go get in the car and we're driving there. And then let's imagine going in and sitting in the waiting room. And then let's imagine sitting there and rolling up our sleeve. And we would just imagine this, and if she ever got too upset, then we would backtrack. Okay, sitting in the chair is too much. Let's go back to the car. All right, we're back in the car. Let's deep breathe. Now let's try to go back in. And eventually we got to a point where she was not passing out. She's now 15. It's been about 7 years, and I think she's probably fine at this point. So systematic desensitization is very, very effective. So if this freaks you out, and I know it does for some of you, I could just totally touch that. It used to freak me out, but it doesn't anymore. Cockroaches are worse, but still I can kill them. I did this with myself because I didn't want to be so afraid of cockroaches that I couldn't kill one. So here's another aspect of behavioral therapy, or another application, I should say. And this is operant conditioning techniques. The previous one was classical conditioning, where we pair two stimuli together until they become linked. Here it's operant conditioning. We're going to give a reward for the behavior that we want. So if maladaptive behaviors can be learned, then they can be unlearned too, can't they? So we're going to replace unhealthy behaviors with healthy ones. There is no emphasis on insight or self-awareness here at all. And you're going to do this with people who may lack insight. So young children, maybe children with autism spectrum disorder who lack theory of mind, maybe people with limited cognitive abilities, maybe children or people with developmental delays. So you might give candy pieces to a child with severe autism for making noises. Sometimes children with autism don't speak. So we might say, if you can make the b sound, I give you an M&M. And if you can say bah, then I give you an M&M. If you can say ball, I give you an M&M. And so we give rewards until the child can do the things that we would like for them to do. Okay. So that's behavior therapy. I want you to know about systematic desensitization and who and why we might want to use operant conditioning techniques. So the last one, and then we'll close out this video, is cognitive therapies. So whereas insight therapies are looking at insight into why you're doing what you're doing, and behavior therapies don't care about that but want to change your behavior, cognitive therapy is almost like a mix of both. It's aimed at addressing the maladaptive thinking that leads to maladaptive behaviors and feelings. So the insight gained in cognitive therapy is about the automatic thoughts that underlie the problems that you're having. So therapists will often help clients identify and challenge irrational and self-defeating thoughts. And the unhealthy cognitions are replaced with healthy cognitions. So there's a little brief introduction. Let me make this a little bit more concrete. So the foundations of cognitive therapies are that, one, you have control over your feelings. You have control over your feelings. You do not have to feel angry about that, or feel left out, or feel sad. You can control it. Number two, how you feel about something depends on how you think about it. How you feel about it depends on how you think about it. So if we can change how you think, then we can change how you feel. So how are we going to change how you think? We're going to engage in something called cognitive restructuring. We're going to change the thought patterns that are causing the maladaptive emotions and the maladaptive behaviors. So this is Aaron Beck. He is the father of cognitive therapy, He is the major figure in analyzing depression. We talked about him before, that when people have maladaptive thoughts, that they often become depressed. So he's the father of cognitive therapy, and he thought that our distorted thought processes were at the heart of our psychological problems. Beck identified up to 15 different cognitive distortions, and these are so key. Sometimes I give homework on this, but we'll see. I don't think I'm going to do that this time. So let me walk you through. There are 15 cognitive distortions, and I'm going to link those to an article so that you can read about these a little bit more. But I'm going to emphasize these 7. Okay. Let me walk you through these because these are the ones that are very, very common. I think you're going to recognize that you do some of these sometimes. Just because you do it sometimes doesn't mean that you're prone to depression. But the more of these you do and the more often you do them, the more prone you are to depression. That's almost a certainty. So polarized, or what I like to call black and white thinking. This is toddler thought. And I can say that because I engage in black and white thinking. I'm not trying to be snotty. It's just that's what toddlers do. Toddlers think everything is all good or all bad. So everything is all or nothing. There is no middle ground for a person who engages in black and white thinking. It's either or. There are no shades of gray. So you might say he's a total loser or she's the most amazing person I've ever met. If you tend to talk in superlatives like that, when you fill out personality surveys, if you're constantly at one end or the other end of the spectrum rather than the middle, you probably engage in black and white thinking. And this one can be difficult for people and cause depression. Overgeneralization. This is coming to a general conclusion based on a single piece of evidence. Something like, I got an F on my paper in English class. Maybe I should just quit school because I must be a terrible student. Well, that's not good thinking. If you got an F on a paper, you should go talk to the professor and go to the writing center and see how you can learn and do better. Whenever we fail, that doesn't mean that that's our permanent state. It means that we have opportunities to learn some new things. So, another example, Jack turned me down for a date. I'll never have a boyfriend, and I'll never get married, and no one will ever love me, and I'll be alone for the rest of my life. I got turned down for the job that I applied for. I'll never get a job. Nobody will ever hire me. Okay, jumping to conclusions. Deciding that you know why people act as they do, sometimes called mind reading. She didn't smile at me when I walked by her today. She must hate me. She said that people who have red hair are mean when she was at the party the other night. She must mean that I'm mean. She didn't come to my party, so she must think that I'm a horrible person and we're all terrible. I did this one time a little bit. Yeah, I'll go ahead and share the story. Okay, I was at a pool party with my daughter. She was maybe 7 at the time, and my daughter is a little skinny thing. My husband is very skinny, and my daughter is very skinny. And I'm at the party, and my acquaintance said to me that her daughter was so skinny that the doctor had said that she should start drinking Ensure. It's like a supplement with vitamins and nutrients and extra calories. And I was looking at her daughter, I was thinking, what? My daughters were standing right next to each other, and her daughter did not look too skinny to me. In fact, she looked heavier than my daughter was. And so I was like, is she trying to tell me something? That maybe I should be giving Hannah Ensure and maybe Hannah is too skinny? So that's maybe an example of jumping to conclusions. Catastrophizing, expecting disaster, magnifying risk. This can come out as what if. I'll tell you, I'm a bad one at this. So it might be something like, if I catch the virus, I will die. It might be, I lost my job and now I'm going to be homeless and live on the street. It might be, oh no, my son got sick. He's going to miss school for a week and miss all of his exams. It might be something like, I lost my wallet, so somebody's going to steal my identity and steal all my savings. So taking something that maybe is bad, but making it as though it's a total disaster where you're magnifying the risk. Okay, personalization. Thinking what others do or say is a direct personal reaction to them, seeing yourself as the cause of an event. So it might be when he said he didn't like people like that, he really meant me. Or it might be I ruined the party when I said that. So the first one is where you think that other people are referring to you and it's personal. And the other one is thinking that you're the cause of everything. So let's think about control fallacies. There are two here. The external control fallacy, where you see yourself as a helpless victim of fate. And the other one is internal control fallacy, assuming responsibility for other people's feelings. So if it's external control, you see yourself as the victim of fate. It's not my fault I failed. The teacher wouldn't let me. It's not my fault I got into a car accident. It was because they were going too fast, not because I wasn't looking. I got an F on the test, and that's just because the teacher hates me. The other one, internal control, where you assume responsibility for others' feelings. Mom was upset when she came home from work, and it's my fault. She must be mad about something that I did, or I need to make mom feel better. So boyfriend or girlfriend is having a bad day, and you take it on yourself that somehow it was your fault and you should make that day better. And finally, emotional reasoning. This one is really, really important for Gen Z from my reading. Jonathan Haidt talks about this quite a bit in his book, The Coddling of the American Mind. So take a look at that if you like. The idea here is if I feel this way, then it must be true. So if I feel hurt by his words, he must have meant to hurt me. So rather than seeing what he said as it was just simply rude, or it was thoughtless, or he didn't mean it that way, instead of I say, well, I'm hurt, so he must have meant to hurt me. We have to be careful with this one. I would say the antidote for this is always assign positive intent. Well, I'll say two things. Assign positive intent, assume that other people are doing the right thing and mean the right thing until you have total evidence that that's not true. And the second is don't always trust your feelings. We have a lot of feelings, and sometimes they are very helpful, and sometimes they're way out of proportion, or they're flat out incorrect. Just think about anxiety for a second. So if you have ever had, say, test anxiety, that's a feeling. And if you said, wow, I'm feeling really, really anxious about this test right now, this must be a really impossibly hard test, and I'm going to fail it. That's not helpful, is it? That's really not going to help you. Test anxiety is almost by definition excessive anxiety based on an incorrect assumption. It's your emotions trying too hard to protect you. So be careful of emotional reasoning. Okay, that's it for therapies. Go ahead and take a look at the link. This is all you need to know for the test, but there are others out there as well, and I think these are really, really key to mental health. So take a look at those, and I'll see you in the next video. It's going to be very short on biological therapies.